Thank you, Dominic, for this warm welcoming. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I try to bridge the gap between your profession and landscape politics, and I welcome you with a short film clip.
Present flight. Cette navette conduit porte d'embarquement E. Nous vous remercions de votre visite et vous souhaitons un agréable vol.
Well, I think before you board a plane, I think you either start checklist of your carrier. Let's come. Weekend. Jetzt geht's raus. Look at it, check it, make sure there's nothing in Dann Zug von der wieder.
As you see, you have landed in Zurich-Kloten Airport and have traveled from Gate E to the airport center by metro. This short journey takes place underground. You touch Swiss soil in a place where landscape is missing, in a tunnel. This fits in a country where tunnels are used to solve many special problems. If this were just simply a journey through a tunnel, I wouldn't have greeted you with it. However, this tunnel is staged as a landscape. Thanks to the speed of the train and images on the tunnel wall, you get the impression that you are traveling through a Swiss landscape. And not just any Swiss landscape. Total Swissness is called for here. After all, you are entering Swiss territory. So you see flower-filled alpine meadows, milk cows, snow-capped alpine summits, and happy alpine farmers waving their flags to the sound of an alphorn. This is naturally an idealized cultural landscape. From visitors' surveys, we know that landscapes is the most important reason for tourists to come to Switzerland. From brain research, we knew that memories of experiences have the exact same physical effects as the experience themselves. In tourism, travelers are presented with staged production of the landscape-based happiness they desire. As I have demonstrated in my studies on the literature about Switzerland and its Alps, this idealized image of Switzerland has been functioning for almost 300 years. It is no coincidence that the name Swiss appears in the names of at least 191 landscapes throughout the world. However, the production of Swiss landscape is not only aimed to tourists, but also at the Swiss people. In this case, arriving in Zurich Airport becomes arriving home. The metro images also remind us Heimat, or our home place. In a representative survey carried out in 2009, the Link Institute for Market and Social Research discovered that the landscape is what Swiss people value most about their country. So the Swiss landscape is a source of identity, which is very important for policy design in Switzerland, because all legal regulations need to be accepted by Swiss population. Landscape is also important for people in other senses. They influence the well-being. This is reflected in the title of an article published in a Neue Zürcher Zeitung on 21st June 2013. It reads, "Landscape is becoming a crucial location factor." The article summarized the findings of a conference organized by the Swiss Association for Spatial Planning on the value of landscape. It stressed out for the population, landscape is at the top of their wish list. For example, landscape plays an important role when people decide where to live, spend their free time, and go on holiday. Seeing landscape as an important location factor demonstrates a paradigm change in the landscape discourse. Landscape is no longer a byproduct or a co-product of land use. Instead, landscape should be understood and treated as a public good for which demand exists in society. They are not simply available on the market. In fact, ownership of land tends to focus the perspective on the plot. This is dangerous because then landscape can degenerate into decoration like a beautiful view of a lake or mountain or the green space in front of the door. If planning and investment were to focus exclusively on the plots, the public interest in the landscape would suffer. For this reason, the conservation and management of this public good cannot be left to the market. Landscape and its management represents also an important task of the state. I would now like to present you a short history of the state task in Switzerland, where the landscape protection has really a very long tradition. It begins in the Middle Ages with the protection of individual alpine forests, which provide security against avalanches and rockfalls. In the last third of the 19th century, this protection grew to include important natural monuments. It resulted in 1940 in the establishment of Central Europe's first national park in the Engadine. After economic boom in the 1950s, landscape protection was written in the federal constitution. This constitutional obligation was given a concrete form in the Federal Act on the Protection of Nature and Cultural Heritage at 1967. Since then, landscape was also incorporated into other landscape-relevant legislation in the areas of spatial planning, water protection, and agriculture. Until the mid-1990s, landscape policy focused on the protection of valuable landscapes. Since then, last 20 years, following the European Landscape Convention, Switzerland has developed a landscape policy that applies to the entire territory. Now, the question is how we shape landscape change in quality-based way. I would like to show you how Switzerland's national landscape policy is answering this question. It is important to know that landscape in Switzerland is the joint responsibility of the federal authorities and the cantons. We at the Federal Office of the Environment are mainly responsible for landscape-related tasks at federal level and the corresponding frameworks. We focus also on social and economic development as a whole, and we face major challenges in relation to this today. We are experiencing a turning point in which global developments have an impact on local conditions. The result is that the landscape is under more pressure today than it ever was before. One can observe in Switzerland the worldwide trends that put landscape under pressure, notably around settlements and infrastructures. Population growth is a major driver of this change. Switzerland has nearly doubled its population in 60 years, while consumption of space per capita is also increasing. Growth and consumption aren't the only pressures. The potential value created by a landscape has never been as far removed from the actual landscape space itself as it is. Let me explain. When we look back at the history, we see that the landscapes we now value so much arose from existential needs. Settlement locations offered the best possible shelter and were close to fertile land. Buildings were made with local materials. Farming practices were perfected to match natural conditions. In this way, regional-based methods of building and farming arose over centuries. Through these existential processes, landscapes were formed which we see as beautiful today. Human artifacts and natural features were combined into a powerful genius loci. But industrialization changed our relationship to the land and its processes. We should not idealize the old relationship between man and nature. Going back cannot be an option for the future. But we need a new way to understand the production and consumption of landscape. Because landscape always reflects the lifestyle of people who live in it, our landscape expresses the globalized world. On the one hand, they are relinquishing their typical regional qualities. On the other hand, they support human identity. The social demand for landscapes is, in Switzerland, at least increasing. People tell us that landscape is an important part of their quality of life, and they want landscapes of quality. These points lead me to an important finding. The law that every landscape mirrors a way of life reveals a paradox. On one hand, in today's world, value creation is not connected to locations. Everything could be everywhere. On the other hand, people want landscapes that they connect to their identity. This poses a huge challenge for landscape policy. If we want to maintain landscape quality, we need to reflect on our way of life and economic activities. I see the need to adopt a landscape-based approach to making economic, social, and aesthetic decisions. This is what the concept landscape culture in my title stands for. Landscape policy must meet the challenge of landscape change. It must not only conserve, but develop new landscapes. Existing and future landscape must be transformed. The federal authorities can contribute to the establishment of conditions that promote quality through the adoption of a current landscape policy. Hence, the Federal Office for the Environment has defined two central objectives in its landscape strategy. The first is to further develop and shape the landscape of Switzerland while preserving their character. The second is to ensure that the services provided by landscapes are appreciated and secured on a long-term basis. 3 strategic directions were defined to achieve these goals. We must first call for a current landscape policy that covers the entire national territory. We have second, promote particularly valuable landscapes. And third, carry out federal activities with respect for nature and landscape. The first part is legally solved by the Federal Act on the Protection of Nature and Cultural Heritage. It authorized the Swiss government to address all landscapes in the entire territory of Switzerland, and not only landscapes that are particularly valuable or worthy of protection due to natural conditions. The Swiss landscape concept, which Dominic mentioned, is an important management instrument for current landscape policy. It was developed in the 1990s together with 13 sectoral policies in a partnership-based dialogue. The concept was approved by the Swiss government in 1997. It contains general and specific targets for nature and landscape, which are binding for all the landscape-relevant sectoral politics, like agriculture, transport, energy, regional policy, or tourism. The landscape concept general targets involve landscape quality objects. So we are in accordance with the European Landscape Convention. In addition to landscape protection, the concept covers also the sustainable use and management of the landscape. An assessment of this concept was carried out in 2012. It showed that a good cooperation was initiated and the most of the specific policies have worked. However, there was still room for improvement. Based on this assessment, the government mandated the updating of this concept. In the updated concept, we plan to focus even more on the actual landscape space and to show the impacts of all the different sectoral policies on a concrete landscape at a regional level. To do this, the landscape-relevant targets of the sectoral policies implemented at regional level must be coordinated, while unique regional characteristics are taken into account. The revised Swiss landscape concept will offer an integrative management instrument for landscape development. A federal landscape policy must also provide resources for cantonal and local implementation. These two levels are crucial for the landscape. We developed a method of working out and founding cantonal landscape strategies using the national system of financial equalization. Our recent publication titled Shaping Landscape Change provides further support for landscape policy implementation, including an overview and some best practice examples. This publication shows how around 40 landscape policy instruments can be used to conserve and promote landscape quality at regional and local levels. With the help of the Association of Swiss Communities, it is currently being distributed to all communes in Switzerland, which are more than 4,000. I'm delighted to be able to present you with copies of this publication fresh off the printing press. We have produced 3 languages, German, French, Italian. It's a pity that we don't have an English version, but perhaps with these 3 languages you can get a better impression of our instruments in Switzerland. The second part of our landscape strategy is to promote particularly valuable landscapes. The Swiss Parks legislation is an important milestone for Swiss landscape policy. Since 2007, the federal government has been able to promote areas with significant natural and landscape qualities as parks of national on the initiative of regions and cantons, based on the fundamental idea that parks arise at regional level and are democratically legitimized. The Parks of National Importance dossier has proved very dynamic. Since 2007, not 10 years ago, 19 new parks are being operated or developed. These are in 3 categories: national parks, regional nature parks, and nature discovery parks. All of the parks are outstanding in terms of their landscape quality, rich biodiversity, and high-value cultural goods. Together, they account for around 16% of the territory of Switzerland. They are laboratories for sustainable regional development based on high landscape qualities. By signing a charter, the communes in which a park is located agree to sustainably develop the park areas. Goods and services that are provided in the parks can be certified using the Swiss Parks product label, generated added value for the regions. This label creates an incentive to develop high-quality regional products, goods, and services. Those local producers are involved to the park's operation and in initiating measures that promote the landscape quality. The parks all provide a varied program of environmental awareness raising and education. Thanks to this broad approach, the Swiss parks are not just areas of high landscape quality, but also innovative cultural, education and development areas. The federal government provides around 17 million euro annually for the parks. The federal funding provided for each park must be doubled at least through cantonal and third-party contributions. This gives the regions the necessary resource to meet the park label's high standards for nature and quality. So far, voluntary park charters are a successful complement to the traditional protection-based instrument of nature and landscape. They mobilize political will and technical skills at the regional level. As the region takes ownership of the park project, the federal government can step back. In addition to the parks, Switzerland has also created a federal inventory of landscapes and natural monuments of national importance since the 1970s. This inventory encompasses 160 sites, which account for around 20% of the national territory. And Switzerland is also home to 12 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, in which landscape also play an important role. In total, these particularly valuable landscapes cover a good third of Switzerland's national territory. They are directly influenced by national policies. In addition to the definition of spatial landscape, Swiss agriculture policy improve landscape quality. Since 2014, over 100 million euros per year from the agriculture budget are also provided for conservation and improvement through landscape quality projects. These projects are developed through participation of the authorities, farmers, and the general population at the regional level. During the process, region-specific objectives and measures are created based on the character of the regional landscape. This process adopts the logic of the European Landscape Convention. These projects have promoted a broad and intensive dialogue on the conservation and shaping of the landscape in recent 4 years. The third part of our landscape strategy is to carry out federal activities with respect for nature and landscape. In all of their planning, construction, licensing, and founding activities, the federal authorities are obliged to save the landscape. Our authority assesses the landscape compatibility of around 900 projects every year. The construction project of the century, the new Gotthard base tunnel, which was opened on 1st June of this year, presented a particular federal task in this regard. This tunnel is an impressive example of a major infrastructure project in which consideration was also given to the design of the landscape. A group of designers consulted on the new Alp transit and the excavation of the 28 million tons of stone. Landscape architects were commissioned to produce a regional landscape design for the excavation material. Artificial mountains and islands were created with the rock, which provide wide-ranging habitats for plants and animals. The forms and the use of material for the landscape design were developed from the dialectic between nature and artificial. The result is an infrastructure landscape that follows an aesthetic and ecological strategy and takes place for animals and humans equally into account on an equal footing. Such projects are important steps toward creating a landscape culture. The next slide gives you a survey of all our instruments and activities. On the right side, you see another important task, the task of agglomeration policy. The conscious consideration of agglomerations is also a part of this landscape culture. Population in Switzerland will grow. According to the forecasts, Switzerland will have 10 million in the year 2045 compared to 8.3 million today. The population will expect high-quality landscape services. So the quality of the landscape in these areas is an increasingly important topic. The Federal Office of the Environment is developing its policy position in this topic. Thereby, we base on the following 3 programmatic statements. On the large scale, all human settlements should be carefully tailored to the natural conditions. On the medium scale, the existing landscape qualities should guide all planning for transport, development, and other land use. On the small scale, existing natural features and build structures which define the regional or local quality of an area to provide inspiration for its development. If the society wants to have high-quality landscapes, we need to engage actively and carefully with the landscape and to adopt a landscape-focused approach. When I used the label Swiss-made in my title, I didn't offer you an ideal Swiss solution on the area of landscape policy. On the contrary, Swiss-made stands for the genius loci as a starting point and as the core element of landscapes culture. Intensive engagement with the local and regional landscape qualities is needed. Landscape has the organic potential to bring people together in a process of planning future use. The power of the landscape lies in the meaning it has for people. Therefore, landscape culture is forged by the process of establishing relationships between man and nature. I firmly believe that because of their solid roots in the landscape, people are willing to assume responsibility to landscape qualities. We have to bridge the gap between this general appreciation and the individual and political decision-making processes. Indifference to existing landscape qualities results often from missing information. As I have shown, we have created in different instruments like the agriculture policy projects or the park projects a collaboration between landscape experts and the population. These discussions and actions can deepen the awareness of landscape qualities. According to Matthias Hawkes, as he states in his essay on Future Research 2016, mindfulness is a new megatrend. We need to practice responsibility and deep awareness on an individual level. We need to perceive the landscape qualities around us consciously and inform ourselves as consumers, clients, citizens about how our decisions affect the concrete local landscape qualities. For example, farmers cannot appreciate and maintain beautiful agricultural landscapes without the creation of added values. So the purchasing decisions made by consumers count. If we do not buy the apples grown on standard fruit trees, all the efforts to provide support for this kind of trees that shape the landscapes in many regions of Switzerland will be ineffective. In conclusion, a high landscape quality brings strength to municipalities and regions. To protect and develop this resource, valuable landscapes element must be identified in her context and linked to the multiple functions which our landscapes have for the society. When people appreciate the connections between themselves, the land, and the local culture, their awareness will deepen. They will be inspired and empowered to contribute positively to the landscape they live in. I'm convinced that this is an important starting point to turn a careless everything, everywhere, into an ecological, social, and economic high-quality landscape. Thank you.